One.
Hi everyone, it's the Monday after break and I'm here without Wi-Fi. So I'm doing the best I can with this video here. You won't see it as normal, but as long as we get the information out, that's what's important. So this video is on the Whiskey Rebellion, a really interesting event to learn about for a lot of reasons. So let's give you some background first about what was it. So first off, you need to know that there was a brand new tax, and this tax was to be put on whiskey. Now, let me read, for this video, I'm going to use a couple of excerpts from a book called Washington Circle, The Creation of the President, and it's by David Heidler and Gene Heidler as well. So they describe why this tax was created. And remember that the Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. And they write, Hamilton had overestimated the revenue that tariffs would generate, and he had to make up the shortfall. The only solution was to levy new taxes, and in considering that, Congress was sure to pause. A grudging nod to the arithmetic compelled many in Congress to accept import taxes on spirits and an excise tax on domestic whiskey as necessary evils, but that did not make the measures popular, right? Remember, one of the big reasons why the revolution was fought in the first place was they felt like they were being too heavily taxed. Now, Madison was not too happy about this, but he realized that such a task may at least encourage, and they quote him as saying, sobriety, and thereby prevent disease and untimely deaths. The College of Physicians of Philadelphia applauded the measure as a wholesome way to curb whiskey guzzling, and that moral imperative combined with the mathematical one quashed opposition. It passed both houses with ease. So, sort of like saying, well, it's not good for you anyway, and it makes people do bad things, so it's not bad to tax whiskey. Now, farmers in Western Pennsylvania opposed these policies. Western Pennsylvania at this point in time was the frontier. Okay, the American frontier didn't end so we got to the Pacific to about 1890. So 100 years earlier, Western Pennsylvania was the wild, wild west, so to speak. There was no, it was much, I don't want to say much less civilized, but there was a lot less control because there was a less of a connection to the areas out east, where it was easier to get places and all sorts of things. So the people out west in Western Pennsylvania depended on transporting extra grains to eastern markets. And that's how they made a lot of their money. Shipping was expensive. So distilling it as whiskey was actually easier to transport and less expensive to transport. So that was a way to do it. Now, whiskey was also used as currency on a frontier that was devoid of a lot of regular money, regular cash that most people would have. So this tax made it like twice as bad. People also realized that collecting it might be risky. Would these people put up a fight the way that some revolutionaries did? So why did this tax anger all them? Now, doing what they did for a living would no longer make them profits, right? So imagine if you basically lost your job. Now, if they had to stand trial for not paying the tax, they would have to go to Philadelphia, which is basically right on the border of New Jersey, right? It's hundreds of miles away. And back then, this is before cars, that would take days, if not weeks. It would be costly. So imagine like being sent to, California or even further today to go to trial. It also felt like they were losing control. Remember, we talk about with the Constitution, are we losing state and local control and rights for federal rights? And they felt like this was an example of that. The federal government is taking control away from something that used to be solely ours and something that we controlled. So you have a federal response and a local response. Hamilton wasn't too concerned about taxing the people and their feelings, so to speak. He knew the government needed the money. We have already discussed all the economic problems the country was having. Something had to be happened. So if a few had to suffer for it, so be it. The government needs revenue. By the summer of 1792, there were meetings all over Western Pennsylvania. What are we going to do about this? And by August, in Pittsburgh, which is pretty far Western Pennsylvania, it's not too far from Ohio, actually, they actually intended to prevent tax collection. We're going to find a way to not pay the taxes. So how do you think Washington feels about this response? Well, he's not too happy. Now, he warned others against these unlawful gatherings. Okay, so what does this mean? All right. Think of our freedom to assembly. What is an unlawful gathering? Is it a gathering to talk about doing something that's unlawful, or is the gathering itself unlawful? So you have people critiquing the use of executive powers already. By July of 1794, an angry crowd were cornering federal soldiers that were there. There was gunfire and the troops surrendered. People were erecting liberty poles, saying, we're not going to take this oppression from the federal government. How do you think Washington feels about this? This is a young country, and they're standing against federal power. Well, he's not happy, and he sends out federal troops on August 23rd of 1794. All right. So Washington decides that force was necessary, especially after rumors had it that insurgents planned to break Western Pennsylvania away from the Union and actually join the British. Hey, you know what? The British gave us taxes and you're giving us taxes. So at least the British protected us out here on the frontier, basically. Now, the Secretary of War at the time was Henry Knox. Now, he had gone home around this time for personal reasons. And even though they were old friends, this had Washington mad at Knox for many, many months. So who leads this is Hamilton and Edmund Randolph. So you got your Attorney General and your Secretary of the Treasury leading troops. Right? Imagine if that was done today, right? And this is Hamilton was very eager to do this. So Hamilton basically went out there and was given the details of moving 12,000 troops from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia out to Western Pennsylvania. This has 13,000 troops, somewhere around there. When they went there, about 20 prisoners were taken. 2 were convicted of high treason and sentenced to death. About 5 of the what's known as the Whiskey Boys, like the people protesting, were killed. People realized that if they sentence these people to death, that's not going to help the image of the young country either. So Washington, even though he wasn't happy about this situation, did pardon both of them, and they weren't actually killed. Now, what are the results? Okay, think about all this that it symbolizes. Did it threaten the government? Right? So would a rebellion like this threaten the government? Would it make it look weak? Would a government like this survive? Many were uneasy about federal troops marching against American citizens, right? So if you can imagine, you see protests today, if like the troops were sent in, not police, there's a bit of a difference. The armed troops being sent in and telling them, you can't assemble. Many farmers still didn't pay the tax. What are they going to do? All right, so the protests, even though they were shut down, were in some ways still effective because they still didn't pay them. What type of protests are permissible by the federal government? What is an unlawful gathering, right? Freedom of protest is such an important part to our country. It also emphasized a fragile hold on more remote parts of the country. We'll see this as the frontier moves west. If you've ever seen old Western movies, right? It's hard to keep control on those remote areas. And the book I mentioned also says, it also symbolized the American government's inability to solve either problem, emphasized on its fragile hold on the more remote parts of the country. And also under Jefferson, who, as you know, was much different than Hamilton, it was repealed in 1800. All right, we'll end this here.